Hello, everybody!
Turn this up in our headphones, Charles.
Ooh.
Yeah.
All right.
One of those.
Hello. Oh, my computer's frozen. There we go. Hello, everybody, one and all. Welcome to yet another very exciting episode of the Friends Talking Fantasy Podcast. My name is Charles, and with me today, as always, is my lifelong friend and co-host, Dylan.
I'm ready to talk some fantasy with my friends, Charles.
Yes, we say the plural friends again today because we are joined by the one, the only MD Presley. He is a screenwriter, blogger, occasional novelist. His new book, The Fantasy Worldbuilding Workbook, is out now. You can check him out over on Twitter at MD_Presley and also on his website, mdpresley.com. Matt, welcome to the show. Thank you for being on today.
Thank you so much for having me out. And man, it is weird to hear your name like MD Presley, like all those things. Like if that didn't get like hammered home, What's his name? Yeah. Thank you for that wonderful introduction.
Sure, of course. Well, yeah, people have to know you've all these exciting things you have going on. I know Dylan and I have been following you like before we ever started FTF, and then now you have your new workbook out, which is really exciting. You know, we're big fans of like dissecting world building and randomly generating stuff and having all these world building prompts. We're super excited to get into that. But before we do, Matt, is there anything else you want to say about yourself before we get started?
Oh God, no, that's like the worst question an introvert can ever be given. Like, would you like to discuss anything? Yes. Yourself? Oh no, never. Yeah. I guess the quick blurb is started out as a screenwriter and spent a long time working as a coverage manager. So I managed coverage for screenplays. So I had a team that was reading screenplays, thousands of them, and kept seeing the same mistakes all the time. And eventually moved into publishing, fantasy publishing, and through Spiffbo, got into world building and or the self-publishing fantasy blog off Spiffbo. Anyways. And anyway, so that turned into this world building book, which is significantly more successful than any of my other fantasy series. So here we are doing world building stuff.
Sure. Well, that's an interesting transition, and that actually makes me want to ask you this question. So you started out screening screenplays. How do you go from screening screenplays to all the way writing like basically a world building workbook? Like what was the transition from like film to fantasy novels?
Well, it was because all of my producers were smart and did not ever greenlight any of my big fantasy ideas because also you understand like fantasy just recently became cool on TV and stuff like Game of Thrones. Broke that door open for The Witcher and all those other things. Like Wheel of Time, no one would have considered Wheel of Time 10 years ago when I was doing screenwriting. So self-publishing, I was like, I'm going to write some books. I would like finally get those big ideas out. And then it was like, I'm not playing the traditional publishing game which is the same thing pretty much of writing or screenplays of like letting producers like, we'll do this, don't do this. Then I was like, no, I'm just putting it out on Amazon. And through that, I got into I met all the self-publishers, the authors that are out there, which is very amazing community. And we kept talking about world building, but we don't have a shared vocabulary of what is good world building. Like it's all scattered. And so I started looking at the theory behind it. And that's what got me into this nonfiction book. It was kind of bizarre that it because if you're really into fantasy, you're going to write nonfiction, right?
Right. Well, it seems like you have an interesting like career approach to it, where you've been analyzing all these different stories over and over again. You start to recognize the patterns, and then you start to put these theories together. And like you said, the bookish community online is so great, and the indie author community is so accessible that you can start to like compare notes in such a way. And it's a really interesting idea.
Yeah, just shout out to everyone in the indie community because it really is. It's not zero sum. Like it's like, hey, let's all do this together. Like so many of the people in my writers group, if that one person discovers something, we all know it within minutes, and we're all helping each other out, and that's truly amazing. So yeah.
Yeah, that is amazing. And you do, Matt, you have your own space that you've carved out here in that I think is a all ships rise with the tide type situation where you're trying to help other folks, indie authors or people traditionally published too, who want to figure out how do I make my world more expansive, more interesting? How do I flesh it out? How do I make it something that readers are really going to gravitate towards? So you've become someone who is a writer's writer, if you will.
Yeah, that's like being a comedian's comedian, like or a musician's musician. You're like, but I want the money. Like, I want everyone to like, I mean, very much appreciate it. But yes, that's a very poor way to live.
That's what the Soul's Harvest books are for, right, Matt?
As soon as someday, whenever they, no. I mean, it was like I went down a checklist of all the things not to do. It was like female protagonist, like nonlinear storyline, like grim dark. Like, oh man, like no one wants to read this. This is unpleasant. So I've learned from that mistake.
So anyway, tell me about some of your fantasy influences, because it seems like even throughout your career, you were always a fantasy enthusiast. Like, what was it about fantasy that kept you interested for so long? And like, are there any particular series that you would cite as, or authors that you would cite as big influences on you?
It was funny because I'm very non-Gaiman-esque, but Gaiman, I remember I was like 17th birthday party. Someone gave me a copy of Sandman, and I kind of left and just started reading Sandman. And it wasn't even the first one; it was like the second book in the graphic novel.
Oh, right.
And it was just mind blowing, like, because fantasy before had been swords and spells, and I read Sword of Shannara before I read Lord of the Rings, so like it was just like, it was but that's what fantasy was. Conan, I mean, there was obviously other stuff, and but those were the things that I had read, and it was. And then just this idea of like there's this other world right underneath your own, and urban fantasy. And then I was really, really lucky at 19. I got to like spend several hours with Gaiman for over a several day period. And he came to talk to our school about comic books, and no one signed up for it. Like, I wasn't in the class. Yeah, they called it like sequential art, so I had no idea to sign up for this class. Okay. And then they're like, we brought this Neil Gaiman in, and I was like, oh my God. And they're like, well, and no one's going to go to dinner with him. I was like, well, I'm going to dinner with him. So I wasn't even in the class. It was me, another student, and the professor, and Neil Gaiman. And then
that's awesome.
Wow.
For the next several days, it was like, got to spend time with him around the campus. So anyways, he was a huge influence. That was a long way of me bragging about how I got to meet Neil Gaiman for a couple of times. But yeah,
no, that's a great story. It's hard to think how much the landscape has changed just in the past couple of years. I'm sure now Gaiman has to like fight people away now that the Netflix series is coming out. So that's so cool that you were able to have that moment.
Yeah, it was really good. And then we got to talk to him, and you're like, what should people read? And he was like, Beowulf. I'm like, I bet you were working on that script right then,
right.
Yeah, it was just so many of the things that, it was really cool. So anyways, he was a big influence on me of just like, fantasy isn't the traditional stuff. You can do whatever you want with fantasy.
Yeah.
And like this, you can have this mind-blowing scope of stuff which is what he does. So like, he made fantasy three-dimensional when it had been two-dimensional before to me. So that would be my major answer on that one. And I really do like urban fantasy and the stuff that was coming out in the Vertigo line of comics at that time. Of there was the John Constantine, that kind of stories. So. And by the way, Neil Gaiman was really great because I barely knew anything about the comics. And I was like, hey, that Constantine guy that you write about, he's really cool. Like, he was like, well, you should probably talk to Alan Moore about that. And like, I'll just hop right on that, I'll just hop right over and we'll just chat, But he was so nice, and because I was this still not snot-nosed kid, but I was in awe, but I had no idea what I was talking about. And he was very sweet about everything. So.
Oh, that's good to hear. Anyway, he seems like a nice guy. And he's an interesting one for the conversation of like world building and fantasy, because like you said, he tells his own story in his own world. And even across books, I've always, like, one of the things I love most about Gaiman is his like the atmosphere that he creates, almost this like supernaturally kind of, even with like American Gods, you get the sense that there's this atmosphere around everything that's going on. It's kind of weird and bizarre and maybe slightly uncomfortable at times, but always it like makes you super fascinated about what's going on too. He somehow managed to capture that, and it's so interesting to compare that to like other people in the fantasy community. And it's like, yeah, world building is a much wider conversation than just like, swords and sorcery, castles, houses, things like that.
Right. Yeah, he makes the mundane seem epic, or like puts a little new twist on it, and you're like, yeah, of course. So
yeah, that's really interesting. So like when you were back in the days reading all those screenplays, and you mentioned you kept seeing mistakes over and over, like what are some of the common mistakes that you would see reading some of these writing prompts that made you go like, someone needs to like put some theory behind this so we don't make these mistakes again?
Oh man, that's like there's so many of them. Like switching genres midway through, not getting your genre out, and within like the first little bit, like you need to, like, what is the story? That sounds dumb because like, but no, you need to solidly tell the audience what the story is, and then you can play with it. But then like, oh, then I'm going to do this, and like not abiding by the 3-act structure. I know that sounds so stupid, especially for screenplays, because everyone's supposed to, but like it's there for a reason. Like we process stories in a fashion, and so you can break the rules, but know the rules first. And man, what was another big one? Oh, this one is so petty. Loose versus lose. Like everyone in screenplays will misspell that one. Like and lightning versus lightning. Like you would not believe the number of times you see those specific typos. My readers would just scan for them. So yeah.
No pun intended. I am shocked that lightning comes up so frequently in writing, I guess, in the screenwriting.
Well, because you write visually, so always like lightning flash and like lightning flash. Yes.
And it's one of those things where spell check will be like, that's correct. And then you won't even catch it ever again because it's not underlined.
And does not becomes dose not very, very quick with just a one,
Right,
and spell check's like, yep, totally okay.
Oh, spell check. Yeah, it's funny how that happens. But like to go back to what you said about like following the 3-act structure and understanding the rules, I do think people are looking to try and write like new stories, something new and different, and that puts pressure. Like they think that what they have to do is break down narrative structure and stuff. But the reality is like the authors that are successful in doing that, and that are successful in like switching genres, like you've said, it comes from an understanding of like how storytelling works and how readers process stories, right? It's like, I know that this is how the 3-act structure works, and by understanding that, I know how to like hit them with twists and turns and know when to introduce new plot lines and things like that. And it's what makes those people that do that like the masters, because they fully understand how the theory works, and then they can add their artistic spin to it. It's for certain authors, like I'm trying to think of like, Abercrombie does that for me, and Sanderson too, the way he introduces plot lines and accelerates things. Like watching those two like tell a traditional story, but somehow also be able to mess with your expectations and change things up and accelerate things at times you weren't necessarily expecting. It all comes from understanding of theory.
Yeah. I had just finished the first one of Mistborn, and I was like, okay, it was like and I was about to do a video breakdown of this, but like the way he did the prologue was I just lost setting up the info dump equity. Mm-hmm. Like, hey, he's just hinting at a power this guy's got. Like, how did he just slaughter this whole thing? Like, so here's the hint of the power, and now we've brought in the the chosen one orphan like combined trope. And she is going to be a vessel so that we can do all the world building. Like, now let's tell her about this, i.e. feed it to the audience through a soft impart, like spoon feed it to the audience. But the audience is like, no, tell me more. Like, how is she going to get this power? Yeah. Like, what can she do with this? And now let's go to the next trainer and they will teach her this. And like, it's so effective, like just masterfully done.
Yeah,
Yeah, it
Mistborn does
almost
a
has
great
a
job. Yeah, go ahead, Dylan.
yeah, it almost has that like video game feel to it, does Mistborn, where she goes to different mentors and they teach her different things, and now she's acquired a new power. And I'll say that the element of world building that I think has always been most interesting to me, and this is why I do gravitate a lot towards Sanderson's work, are magic systems. And I know you've gotten into magic systems before. I see you got into it in world building for fantasy fans and authors and creating comprehensive magic systems. What kind of things do you feel like characterize a comprehensive and great magic system? I know Sanderson has all sorts of laws, but we want to hear your take too, Matt.
Actually, that's what the next world building book is going to be about, is specifically magic systems.
Tease.
And how to build animals and like creatures and stuff. But because it was supposed to be a appendix of the workbook, and then it was like 50 pages long, and I was like, I'm still just scratching the surface of this. Like,
there's a lot to say about magic systems and fantasy.
But they kind of go on they like stages. So like at first you start off with like just mentioning what it appears like. So it's appearance, abilities, limitations, and then costs. And you don't need it. And I would have thought all good magic systems have a cost, and they don't. Like Airbender doesn't, like Harry Potter doesn't, the Force isn't. Like it's kind of amazing how they don't have costs, and Sanderson's don't have costs. Like Mistborn like doesn't have a cost. I'll be like, yeah, I have to take the stuff, and I have a unknown amount of energy, but it's
or if you overdo it,
right?
If you anyway.
But it's more of a level system, which is the third form. And that means that like once you get to this level, you've unlocked these powers and you pretty much have unlimited use of them in that time period, of it. And so it's about how creatively you use them, which is Sanderson's point of like the second law of world building is, limitations are more important than powers. So it's how which is Harry Potter, which is a leveling system. Each year they learn some new spells, but they're always, and this is one of the things that's cool about leveling systems, is you're always fighting someone who has a higher level. And then you are using your powers creatively to get around it. So like the Harry Potter kids with only 3 years of magic training are taking on Death Eaters and have to use their Accio well to figure out something and bring me my broom so that I can do this. So that's the third stage is level powers. So anyways, there's kind of a hierarchy of power, there's a progression of how magic systems work. And like if you have like a soft point system, which is like the middle one, like mana, which is, we all know from video games, is like mana resources. Like you can, but you can cheat that one and then make it into a cost system of like, well, I can do the spell that I normally shouldn't, but I'm going to need all these things, these special equipment and extra time. And then I can do, which is what the show Buffy did all the time, was like, hey, Willow needs to cast a spell, or like, we need to cast a spell, but we're going to have to go get these things first. And that's the episode. It's about getting the things. So anyway, sorry. That was I could just blow up that question and spend like 3 hours on that. So I'm going to try to.
It's almost like you're writing a book on it.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time thinking about this, and it's all based on Sanderson's 4. There's secret. We talk about 3 of them, but there's secretly 4, and it's all based on those. And then the 4 C's of world building, like they all like align perfectly.
Interesting.
And so I think that there's really something behind it. Like my first book on the for fantasy fans and author. That was all based on other people's theories. And like, it wasn't just me talking about world building because that's what everyone else does. Like all the other books out there are like, well, this is my system. And so I didn't want to do that. I wanted to look at everyone's system, give everyone the tool, all the readers, all the tools in the toolbox, and then you can pick and choose which ones you want to use. And my workbook is more of my system, but more of, like, take these things and use them, and this is what works for me. Like, so that's why this magic system thing is more me, is more of my theories. And so that's why I'm a little more uncomfortable. I feel safe in them mostly, but I need to think them out a lot more than I have already. So anyways.
That's super interesting. Yeah, because I mean, magic systems are like a very unique part of writing fantasy, and it's so interesting to see how all these different stories are all kind of, you could start to develop a theory when you look closely enough. It's like, oh yeah, for example, like, the idea of limitations, and it's like, well, Sanderson is kind of working them in, but it's more about leveling. So it's interesting to kind of dissect that, and then take that and put like some of your favorite books through these lenses, like Harry Potter, for example. I never thought of Harry Potter as a leveling magic system, but it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Especially when you look at the years, you're like, oh my God, they actually spell out the levels. Like, in third year, we're going to learn this.
Yes, exactly right.
and I don't think she was conscious of this. Like, and actually, when I was talking to Michael Sullivan about this, like when I finished, I gave a presentation of this to some other authors, and when I was done, he was like, "So what's the point? Like, why do we want this stuff? Like, you're taking the unconscious process and making it conscious, and does that kill the creativity when you start like kind of doing it by a number system?" And we're like, well, it's not supposed to do it by a number system. I firmly believe like in the unconscious process, but you can, like, if something's not working, this is like psychology. Like, then you can like, what's not working? What can I find? And therapy, I know, right?
I was like, well, you said the words.
So I'm getting my PhD in counseling psychology right now, and Freud is not the most popular these days in our modern way of thinking of psychology, but that making the unconscious conscious is exactly what he thought. That insight was something that gives you more freedom, and that you actually can heal from your suffering in that way. I don't know how that applies necessarily to writing, but I would think that there's some sort of like, once you know the tools in your toolkit, then you're able to say, oh, like my unconscious process would want me to go to a hammer right now, but actually what I need right now is the equivalent of a screwdriver. And you start being able to see what you're doing for what it is, rather than just kind of like flailing wildly, because not everyone has what Rowling experienced with writing Harry Potter, where if you're looking for this like success in fantasy writing, it might need more conscious process. And we know that's exactly what Sanderson does. He's all about making these rules and techniques, and it's hard to argue with his success in applying that and teaching it.
I was very much surprised at how unconscious it is for a lot of people, like the world building. Like, so much, I figured there'd be a lot more top-down designers out there, and like I was doing what was it, CornCon. I was doing the world building panel, and had some great, like Evan Winter, Andrea Stewart, Bone Shard's daughter, like anyways, had some incredible authors up there, and then it was like, okay, how many of you guys are top down? And like, so, like half of them were top down. The others, like RJ Barker was just like, no, I don't know. Nope. I just make stuff up on the fly, and then, hope that was what it, and
no, it's interesting. I mean, different processes work for different people. It makes me think of when I studied music theory in college, and it's the same thing. It's like, oh, like these chords sound good next to these chords, and it's part of these scales, and like they have it down to a number system. They assign chords numbers and things like that, and it's all patterns. And you can look at Bach and be like, he was a genius. But then you look at someone like Paul McCartney, who can't even read sheet music.
Can't read.
So it's like, there's different kinds for everyone. And it's just the understanding of it. And then again, it's like you understand the rules so you can break them. You get people like all these impressionists who are famous for composing these beautiful pieces. And you're like, they break every single rule, but they do it in the most fascinating way, and that's where like the art comes in. So it's all part of the process, right? Having these theories and like understanding it helps you kind of put an idea to studying it and theorizing. It's like art as well. You can take a whole bunch of art classes and like improve and do better and appreciate the theory, and then you can also learn how to break those rules, and it's just more tools in your toolbox as a creator.
Yeah, and that's what I think a lot of my system about the tools, and specifically, is like in painting. Like, we're learning how to paint these certain things. Like, what you're going to paint with it is you, and that's your creativity, and that's where you show your creativity. But this is how you do a still life, and and which is one of the reasons I world build a new book, a new world every week. Is it's fun, like, and it keeps my world building sharp, and just to do this thing, and like, oh yeah, I could do that. Like, it's
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I'm not going to be able to write a book about all these things, even though I kind of want to go back for some of them. But like
Right.
but yeah, it just keeps the process. It is one of the things that Neil Gaiman has said when I met him many years ago was, whenever you're stuck, whenever you have writer's block, write a sonnet. And he was like, it's short, it has rules, you have to follow the rules, and you show your kind of creativity in it, and then it just unclogs the creative process. And then you can get back to working on whatever it is, but just, take a few hours, write a sonnet, because that's what Neil Gaiman does. He just writes a sonnet whenever he's feeling a little mentally cramped. So he just,
as you do.
I believe that. I'm not something surprised. But Neil Gaiman writes sonnets to get through his creative blocks. That's funny.
Yeah, of course he does. But that is one of the other things I very much like about rules and stuff, and it's specifically sonnets, because and which goes back to the screenplay structure and stuff, is like you show your creativity by kind of following the rules in a creative way. Like, this is how you do 14, lines of a sonnet. I hope it's 14 lines, or haiku or something like, but you did something special with that. And so rules are not a bad thing, but strictly adhering to them can be. But
yeah. Well, you got to know.
Sorry, yeah.
Being too conscious. I was gonna say you gotta know where the lines. You got it, Matt. Go.
Yeah, no, being too conscious can be a problem. But I also think that you need to be conscious for the editing process. You write unconscious, edit conscious, which is better than write drunk, edit sober. But so it's which I do not advocate.
But it's the idea of letting your creativity happen and then polishing it up, make sure it's something that a wider audience can appreciate and digest, and like just going through the editing process and maybe tweaking something based on a certain theory could vastly improve your unfiltered thoughts. Like I see that happen all the time through the creative process. It's like, oh, that's what you came up with, but then if you apply this rule, all of a sudden it blows everything open. It's through that theoretical process that you can do that.
I've always thought.
No, please go ahead.
Yeah, well, the way you've been talking about it, I've always thought about the phrase, you got to know where the lines are to color outside them. And I think that's a huge element that I see from the world building that I really love is they understand a lot of these things that we're used to. They provide us with that, and then they put their own twist on it in a way where you say, oh, wow, this is interesting because it's juxtaposed against something that we're used to. And that's something I think Charles is getting at Abercrombie's writing. I think that he does really well, where you see that twist that just makes it slightly askew. And then you're like, oh, I didn't even know you could take this formula and then go that way. And it sounds like that's a lot of what you're encouraging with your world building work is, well, yeah, understand the rules, the common language, and then say whatever you want in the common language.
Yeah, just use the right word. I mean, like, we own a thesaurus. Well, we don't. We have them built into our computers and the internet. But you used to have a thesaurus, so you could have the right word for it. So yeah, that is kind of what I was hoping for.
But then you have someone like Stephen King, who I think it's his quote where he says, "Any word you have to find in a thesaurus is the wrong one," which I always thought was a interesting quote.
I mean, I have to say, there's Chris Knight, who's one of my favorite musicians, a country singer, and like, I don't think that man owns a thesaurus, but my God, his song, like, it is the simplest words, and they are the right words every single time. So,
right.
Yeah.
And so, what I want to do now is talk more specifically about your Fantasy Worldbuilding Workbook, which was just released August 12th, just last week at the time of this recording. And what I'd like to know more about, you say you have all of these world building prompts. So how would someone use this workbook is it someone who has their world already and they're looking to improve on it? Or is it someone looking to build one from scratch? How do we use the world building workbook?
I'm glad you asked that, because it uses both methods.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, most authors, there's a continuum between top down, as in you design everything ahead of time, and then the bottom up, if like you write and you're like, what do I got? And most people are somewhere in between those two extremes. Though Daniel Potter is probably on the far bottom up. But I have a quote from him in there about that, about his process. But
Cool.
anyway, so I look at it in both processes and have, this is what a top down can do. This is what a bottom up can do. And you're going to use both of them at some point in time, because no matter how top down you are, you're going to have written something, you're like, oh, that's a really great idea. How am I going to expand on that? And then if you're bottom up, like even, you have a general idea of what you're doing. And the funny thing about bottom up is each word that you write constrains you more into the world that you've built. And so, and constraints are not a bad thing, especially in world building. In fact, they kind of are necessary, because otherwise it's that flight of fancy, anything can happen, randomized, the magical realism kind of thing. But anyways, so each chapter in the workbook, it looks at it from both perspectives of what you can do. Bottom up a lot of times is, taking these things and then figuring out what you can do with them that you've already done, which is why I grab several ideas out of my bucket each week to build a new world. That's the bottom up process. You have these things, and how do I put them together? And then top down is like, well, I plan this, and then I can build out, I can extrapolate out from that way. So the book tries to teach both methods in each section, like antecedents is like, well, if you have these ideas, then what caused them, and then what's going to happen because of them. That's the extrapolation and the antecedents. And yeah, so it's and it's also, the book is set up so that it's kind of choose your own adventure, even though you can't legally say that because they own the rights to choose your own adventure.
Really?
You can't market your book as choose your own adventure. By the way,
is that like the Goosebumps books on the? Because I remember those are called that.
Are they?
Kid. Those the Goosebumps. They used to have this is not relevant to world building, but they used to have these Goosebumps choose your own adventure books. I'm pretty sure they marked them that way when I was a kid. I don't know.
Maybe they're owned by the publisher that has the rights.
Yeah.
Maybe. I don't know. Yeah. So anyways, but I'm using that method of like, whatever questions that you actually pertain to you. So it's not like you're just going through the book, reading all the questions. Right. All the prompts, I've got a biological idea, like I've got monsters in my book. So let's look through the biology section. And these are the sections, like I can skip this whole section because this doesn't pertain to me. Moving on to the next one. And so it's got a kind of choose your own adventure way where you can jump to these sections.
You use it as like a reference for whenever you have questions, like trying to test certain things about your world building and things like that, and the book will guide you through the different sections and
hopefully yeah. Yeah, I mean, but some of the authors that have used it have enjoyed being able to, because then it also makes you consider things that you hadn't, I've got this creature, and they're like, well, what is its life cycle? Like, does it have a metamorphosis? Yeah. Like, is it from how long do they stay with? Are they herd animals? So things that you might not have considered, but that were probably not deal breakers for your world. But the more you know your world, the more realized it seems to the audience itself, I think. So, so yeah. And then there's the wonderful section of, so you've written yourself into a corner, and how to extricate yourself from, when you invariably contradict yourself within your own world, of how to get yourself out of that corner in the first place, or not get into that corner in the first place, I guess. Yeah.
Wow.
So do you see people reading this mostly flipping around to stuff they most need, or reading it front to back? What do you think is the best way to use the Fantasy Worldbuilding Workbook?
I'd like them to read it from front to middle, which is where the prompts start. Sure. Just to get the basic, not the basic, but this is what a Bible is. Like, this is the things you can put in there. You don't have to. And just so that you have the not the background, but something, the foundation. So then you can, now they can build the skeleton up and pack all the meat on there after you have the skeleton idea. And these are things I'm going to want to use. Like, this is, me considering extrapolation, a little bit more. So yeah, I mean, I'd like them to read it like that. I just want them to buy it, honestly. But if it works really well.
That's the Joe Abercrombie way as well, as he's always saying, just buy it. I don't care what you do with it. It's like use as a paperweight.
Tweet at him like, what reading order should I do this in? He's like, read all of them. Get them all.
It's like, buy all of them. Buy all of them. Read them in whatever order you want.
Right. Yeah. And that's true. I mean, yeah, exactly right. And So you read it through the middle, and then you say you have over 750 world building prompts. So
Yeah.
what is a world building prompt, and how do we use them?
No, it's just really just the
And
kind
why
of
do we need
question.
750 of them?
You don't. That's the best
More, you
part.
need more, Charles. 750 plus.
Yeah, it was actually 800 and something, but at that point I already had the cover made. So it's like, I'm not going, like, me and cover artists are like, yeah.
Career clashing.
Oh man, I was gonna say like oil and water, but it's like two flammable things that just I have very terrible luck with cover artists. Anyways,
It looks great though.
no, thank you. Yeah,
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Except that he wouldn't do my cover for the hardback. He just refused to. So I have a different looking hardback that I did myself, and I'm terrible at it. But anyways, I forgot. Sorry, what was the question?
The prompts. So how do we use the prompts? Why are they here? What is a world building prompt?
Oh, it's just the questions about your world. Most of the other books that are out there, like, are the question. There are a lot of other books out there with prompts, and you can actually just go online and probably look up some prompts, but they're not organized very systematically. So that's one of the problems. Is like, hey, so that's what I kind of did, because there are 6. I keep saying there's 8, but there's 6 kind of types of fantasy conceits that happen. And so then I made sure that these are the ones that are under geography. So these are the ones that are under biology, magic, et cetera, et cetera. So that you can find the ones very easily that involve your world. So you're not just like looking at things about architecture when it doesn't matter to your world at all.
Yeah.
So yeah, that is they're organized for ease of use, and they're not. I guess they're not really prompts so much as that they're not to inspire. They're just to, I guess, focus the world by making you consider things you hadn't. And I really think. I mean, this sounds dumb. Like, I organized them. Like, how groundbreaking was that? Who would ever have thought of putting them all into sections that are easy to find? That is my great contribution to the field right there.
No, it's super fascinating, and it makes me want to buy a copy myself and go through all. I see it's available on Kindle Unlimited as well, which is fantastic. Yes. And scrolling through all the different prompts just to see how you've categorize them, because it's like you said, it's like, I built this creature, but then when you ask me the question, like, what is its life cycle, does it move in herds, then you're like, oh, I could make it move in herds, and then there could be later a pack of them that come out, and then now the character has to do these things, so it's like this creative energy that this book, the potential that this book can generate is it seems really exciting. It sounds like how long did it take you to come up with all of these prompts? Because it sounds like to me you've had to put a lot of time and thought into dissecting all these things. Like, have you sat with this material for a long time?
I actually, it was a year ago that I started it, but I try to write a rough draft and then try to have like 2 things going at the same time, so that you're editing one and then writing, and then I had some screenplays that I had to finish for some folks in the middle of that. So anytime you make a plan, God laughs, and then something else happens. So I had given up on screenwriting, and now I'm a working screenwriter again. And it's like, okay, and now all I want to do is write books. And so now this thing that I dedicated my life to for 15 years is in the way of the other thing that I want to do. But so this, I think when I put it out, I had finished or had started the rough draft a year previous. And you think of more questions, if you run across someone else's questions, you're like, oh, that inspires these ideas, and so I kept adding to it. Oh my God, I kept adding to it. And till I eventually just had to walk away from it. And then I think I've thought of 3 more since I released the book. I'm like, all right, next version of the book, we'll add some more questions.
That's awesome. It's just one of those things that sounds like it's never ending, and you're working on the magic systems thing as well. So it sounds like you've really kind of written yourself into this wonderful niche for the fantasy theory, fantasy writing theory, which I find super fascinating. Dylan and I have always kicked around this idea of a fantasy history theory, this idea of what came before what, and putting actual theories to that. And it sounds like you've already gone a long way in carving out this theory for authors. And I even see here that you call this series Forging Fantasy Realms, and you have 101 world building prompts that are free for people. Is that something that people can go on and just download and just start playing with right away?
Yeah, please. I mean, it's that's the primer. That's the first. That's the sample of heroin that's supposed to
Right,
get
that's
you
the
hooked.
taste.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, just 101 questions. Actually, it's significantly more than that because then it's like questions, sub questions. So and then it's got a little bit of kind of the background of like these what a fantasy conceit is. It's what an analog culture is. Fantasy functions, which is how you plug them together. So yeah, it's just to demonstrate that I know what I'm talking about. Everyone, please go get it. It is free everywhere.
Yes.
And yeah, and
Nice.
so it costs you nothing to see if you like it. And yeah, and then the first book, the World Building for Fantasy Fans and Authors, which I have to look at it every time because otherwise I'll screw up saying my own title. That one's a lot more theory, which some people don't particularly like. They're like, this didn't help me build the world. They're like, yeah, because it says in the opening chapter, this is all the theories and stuff. So yes.
Right. It's part of a collection. And then this is all kind of the groundwork for, it sounds like it's going to be, I don't want to like give the scoop, but it sounds like it's going to be the groundwork for your magic system stuff. And who knows where it will take you from there. This will hopefully be a never ending series of different aspects of the fantasy world. And just for years, you'll be making more and more headway in theorizing all these fantasy elements of a good story.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to get back to writing soon, but yeah, that is the problem with the nonfiction. Of like, it was fascinating. Also, nonfiction is so hard to write. I mean, like fact checking it, and then you have to write in the literary present. Like, I didn't know that was a thing. That's and I did it partially, but not all the way. And my poor copy editor. Anyway, see. God bless him, Chris Sander. If you're not listening to this, but
shout out to Chris.
If you were,
shout out to Chris. The guy's busy trying to edit your copy for your next thing. He's like, oh, this guy.
Oh yeah, this guy. Yeah, his day job is writing for the like copy editing for the government, like manuals and stuff. So like that's he is exacting.
That's probably what you need for that role.
It certainly is. Yeah, none of this like. Anyways, sometimes I try to write, much more relaxed, bloggish, and he's like, no, that is not academic. That's not how you do. That is an incomplete sentence.
So are you working on anything fiction? Can we expect a new fiction fantasy book from you sometime soon?
Yes, I'm actually going to relaunch my Soul's Harvest, which is Flintlock fantasy analog of the American Civil War, with psychic exoskeletons and stuff.
As you do.
So better, as you do. And but I never got to finish the fourth book. It's been written, and then I had some health issues that threw everything off, and so that's why I focused on this world building one because I couldn't get back into the world, and so. I'm relaunching it, so with it all finished. So I'm gonna do that finally, and then move on to an urban fantasy world that I have had in my head for more than 15 years. So it's finally time to get it out.
Wow.
Great! Now that you've got all the theory, you can finally take that idea and actualize it.
I'm gonna have to build the magic system ahead of time just so I can, because it'll be fun. Hopefully it's a kind of almost murder mystery series, but with urban fantasy and different magic systems each time that you have to kind of figure out and figure out so it should be very crunchy and
Well, that's cool. It sounds like you made the magic system a part of the mystery elements of it, which I think something that's really admirable when people do awesome world building is they find a way to ensure that it's always synthesized in the story and that the characters are really grounded in it. They can find that way where it doesn't just feel like its own gratuitous thing. It feels like an inherent part of the story that you're telling. And it sounds like that's what you're going to be doing.
Yeah, and Michael Sullivan did have a good point when he talked about making it too conscious. Like when it is too conscious, you're like, well, I got to include this. I made it up. Like Jemison says, like, don't inflict your suffering on others. Like you've spent all this time on the world building, and so like, well, everyone wants to know about it. Then you're like, they don't.
Yeah, she's got a counseling background, so I'm not surprised to hear her say that.
That's true. Yeah.
Man, well, Matt, this is all really fantastic. I think I have one last major question for you, and that is where can people buy all these wonderful works that you've been cranking out, both fiction and nonfiction?
Well, Amazon, I'm one of those Amazon exclusives. Though that's not true. You can buy the hardbacks, not hardbacks. You can buy the paperbacks on Barnes and Nobles and stuff. But Amazon, MD Presley. Also hit the website mdpresley.com,
Absolutely.
and that that'll take you to all of them.
Yeah, that's great. So definitely, guys, check out MD Presley's website, which is beautifully mdpresley.com. Congratulations on that URL, by the way.
Oh God, I didn't get it the first time, but I got it the second time.
Oh, God, I got it. Yeah, I know. That's always happens. So that's fantastic. And then check out, he's got the 101 prompts that you can download for free. And then you can go ahead and check out Fantasy Worldbuilding Workbook, Fantasy Worldbuilding Workbook, which is actually, I see now, number one new release in fiction writing for the genre of fiction writing reference. So congratulations, Matt.
Nice. Congrats,
awesome.
Matt.
Yeah, you got to find a really small niche. I mean, you got to find that category that's like
I don't
3.
know. I feel like writing.
Give yourself some credit, dude. You're number one.
Is a big deal. So, congratulations to you. So, guys, you don't want to be missing out on this. If you've ever thought about writing fantasy, if you're currently writing fantasy, and you want to put your world to the test here, check
Dungeon
out
Masters
book. Dungeon Masters, sure. I mean, look, guys, even if you don't care at all, just buy it anyway, right? Like, come on, it would make a great door stopper. You look good on the shelves. Like, any reason to buy it, just go for it. Well, Dylan, is there anything else we need to say to Matt? Or Matt, do you want to any other plugs that we may have forgot to mention before we wrap things up?
I do actually have a new YouTube channel.
That's
I believe,
right.
Yeah, and that's the one where I create a new world every week, and I don't even know the name of it. I mean, it's Forging Fantasy Realms. Is that a thing? Anyways, Forging Fantasy Realms. That's the name of the series. Name of the also the YouTube channel. Check it out. I
see you with the big trick or treat bucket full of prompts. You've got a giveaway going on as well. So absolutely check out the YouTube channel, guys. Sounds like a lot of fun.
Well, I'm glad someone thinks so.
Well, we've tried to do something similar in the past. We've done like what we call friends creating fantasy, where we generate characters and tropes and a book title. Because for us, we always thought the blank of blank was such a common book title that you could just pick any words and try and create a story from it. So we've spiritually tried to do the same thing. But now that we have you, Matt, as a reference, we should bring you back and actually try some of that world building through your lens that you've actually written books about, instead of us just taking stabs at something randomly.
My friends and I used to do that back in the screenwriting days of like, just here's a premise, like develop it. And the secret of the universe is stuck in a pack of cigarettes. Go. And it was a lot of fun. Yeah.
Pressure makes diamonds with those. You never know what kind of stuff you'll come up with when you have to find a way to make meaning out of a bunch of randomly generated things. So,
right.
You have to. Matt, I know you saw my GIF of Evan Winter, right?
Yes.
So I'm going to ask you on air if I have permission to GIF you.
Please.
Your channel.
I'll have to find something fun to do. I'll just.
Well, once you're on YouTube, you're not safe anymore.
Yes.
Dylan probably already has some ideas of things to. You've probably already done something. You just haven't seen it yet until Dylan gifts it.
Yeah. Now you're a friend of the show, Matt. So you can expect gifting. That is something.
It's getting to sound
not
pretty
that
dirty.
Evan Winter. Evan Winter, I just took that from a Daniel Green interview, so we haven't met him, but maybe one day. That's something to aspire to.
That's right.
If he ever comes back, he's been hunkered down on book 3, like just cranking it out. So he's
nice.
But
great.
He if you want to talk about not just a writer's writer, but like so many of the writers just like, dang, like Evan speaks, everyone shuts up because
Yeah, no, we've been recommended his work like countless times, and it's Dylan's got a couple on the shelf. I see him looking for.
somewhere.
So we're big fans, and we're hoping to talk about his work on the show in the very recent future. But for now, guys, MD Presley, check out his Forging Fantasy Realms series, the Fantasy Worldbuilding Workbook, out now, and then check him out over on YouTube as well. The fun will never end. There's hundreds and hundreds of prompts, guys. You don't want to be missing out on any of that. And Matt, thank you so much for coming on the show. We really appreciated getting to learn more about you and your process, and then about world building, for world building's sake.
Thank you so much for having me on. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it.
All right, guys, this has been. Oh, Dylan, you want to say something before I wrap it all up?
I just want to say I appreciate you coming on, Matt.
Yeah, we're huge fans. Like I said, we've been following your work before the show ever started. Dylan's been talking about you like well before FTF was a thing. So to have you on now is really cool.
Oh, I'm blushing. You can hear it over the air, right?
Yeah. Yes. The audio blushing is great content. Thank you so much, Matt. Really, we do appreciate it. And we're excited for what you got coming up. That Urban Fantasy sounds like it's going to be a lot of fun, and a whole lot of other world building stuff to come to. And that magic system thing, that's caught my eye. So yeah, appreciate you.
Cool.
All right, guys. Thank you all so much for listening. Again, MD_Presley on Twitter, MDPresley.com, and Forging Fantasy Realms over on YouTube. Check it all out. Thank you all so much for listening. And as always, go forth and conquer, friends.